online with you.
So one of the things that is making headlines around the world is the London patient. And we've had a brief conversation with Sharon about that. I was wondering, what's your take on what's happening around the remission and the cure associated with that?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, there's just a lot of takeaways from it. And the first thing is that it really means that, Tim Brown was not just a one-off. Like, it looks like the same thing's happening again. And the way that the data has been presented and the team has put the research together, to me, it's fairly definitive. I mean, the extent of research they've done to show why this man is in long-term remission is very thorough. And it really points to this issue with this CCR5 co-receptor in the donated bone marrow.
CCR5 co-receptor is forming?
Yeah, I mean, when HIV is in a person, it's got to live inside a cell, and the cell lives in a CD4 T cell. And that CD4 T cell has two things that HIV's got to connect to for that virus to get in that cell. It's got to connect to this thing called CD4, which is why it's called a CD4 T cell, and this other thing called CCR5. And if those two elements are not there, HIV is not able to enter and get into that cell. And what they did was, like with Tim Brown, when this man had this leukemia and then he had this transplant, they gave him a new immune system. They gave him a new blood system. And the immune system and blood system they gave him didn't have these CCR5 co-receptors. So any virus he had left over in his body would not be able to get into these new immune cells that he'd been given as part of this transplant.
So this is the same that happened with the London patient.
Yeah, this is the same thing. The London patient and Tim Brown, also referred to as the Berlin patient. This same process occurred, and they've stopped treatment in this man. And it's really interesting. I mean, when they reported Tim Brown's case the first time, that was to a lot of fanfare. He'd been off treatment for 20 months, and he had no virus.
A little bit still, if you can. You're bouncing around. Sorry.
Right, that's okay. Maybe I'm just getting too enthusiastic. There's a similar amount of time that this gentleman in London has been off treatment, 18 months now. So they've not released this information until they've sort of been relatively sure. I mean, when they presented the information, they were directly asked, actually, in the questions, is this a cure? And they were being, I think, fairly conservative in saying, it's a long-term remission, really, from HIV. But I don't know. It's extraordinarily similar to Tim Brown. And the other thing about this man, he didn't have anywhere near a traumatic course through his transplant. It was a very rigorous process he had to go through, but he didn't really suffer as many complications as Tim Brown, and he wasn't in hospital for as long as Tim Brown was. So
what is this going to mean, I think, for people living with HIV? Does this mean that we can go in and get CCR5 out of our genes?
Well, yeah, no, you can't do that, obviously, but it really, if this man continues to have long-term remission, and that there's this other case also presented here of another patient, right, from Germany, and he's being referred to as the Dusseldorf patient because he is from Dusseldorf. But it's the exact same setup. Well, I shouldn't say the exact. It's a very similar setup where he had a blood cancer, received a transplant with this bone marrow or this new immune system that doesn't have this CCR5 co-receptor, and he's also off treatment. But he's only been off treatment for 3.5 months, so it's a lot earlier. And it hasn't probably had the you Google today London patient, and you'll just get this enormous stream of interviews and all over the world in media in the US and Europe and Australia. This other patient's actually not being done as the researchers are not standing up presenting it, but it's actually just a poster in the hall here. But I think the difference is that he's only been off treatment a relatively short time, but they have not found any virus in this man, and he's been off treatment for 3.5 months. So if you take all these together, you'd have Tim Brown and this man from London and possibly this other man from Germany. And if you had 3 men that had this long-term remission or cure with this same mechanism, it really goes to show that if we can get it, like you're saying, if we can sort of attack this or get at this CCR5 issue in people with chronic HIV that don't have cancer, that's a really important avenue that's for the researchers to follow. It really is going to be important.
I agree. I agree. And when you get back from Seattle, I'd love to have another discussion with you on camera about the CCR5, in particular the CRISPR babies. I'm sure there's discussion going on there. Maybe we can reflect on that. And I'd also really love it if you could take a look, if you poke around the posters, because we all know sometimes the posters have some of the best content. If you find something interesting, send me a message. I'd love to have a quick chat like this on screen with you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my absolute pleasure. We can, we can talk about the trial. We've got a poster here of a trial we did in Melbourne with two very brave participants who went into a trial, a cure-focused trial, and they got some toxicity from the drugs that we gave them, and they recovered from that. But we think that's a really important finding, and we've got to be very honest and open about, side effects. If people are happy to undertake these trials and do these interventions, and there's problems, we've got to report that information, and we're reporting on that here at this conference. And as I said, these patients have fully recovered from that, which is great. But it's really, these are important messages we give to the community that combination that we chose maybe not better for other people if they were considering doing that in other parts of the world. So that's an important finding that we think that we're presenting here at this conference as well. I'm not trying to promote my own world, obviously, but we think it's an important finding, so it's worth mentioning maybe.
Look, everyone who's living with HIV is interested in a cure, no matter if it's a small step or a massive step. And really, thank you so much, James, for taking your time out of your schedule to have this chat with us.
My absolute pleasure. Anytime, Brent. Absolutely, as always.
Take care and enjoy Croy. We'll talk to you when you get back.
Thanks,
if
Brent.
not before. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.